Oh my gosh, they do the same thing with me. Oh my gosh.
I'm like looking at it. They know it's fruit or veggies.
Yeah.
It's almost always.
Yeah.
Or something healthy before you get.
Right.
Yeah, just put up all those carrots.
Yeah, yeah. It's a shame you had to get this now.
Not good timing.
No, no. Not at all. All right, well, hang in there.
This picture here.
Yeah.
And this kind of looks like Katie. Yeah. That would be
Oh, I hear you, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I actually asked if I was going today, so I could do
Yep. I think we can feeling we should be like
You're talking to
like
us?
trays or something.
yeah.
Offering hors d'oeuvres.
Right.
That's okay.
Absolutely. Hey, Pete Parken. Sorry.
How are you?
Hi, Hillary.
Okay, did you do all right last night?
We're too young to only see each other at funerals.
Well,
Oh, no worries.
yeah.
I think I'm stands. No way, TJ's. I think TJ's.
No, there's four.
That's the way Aaron made. I'm guilty getting mad. Sorry, but you can. We just want to be able to be there.
Okay, I'm Sarah. I used to this guy. He's known the family for
The banjo became through scouting. Always knew Nancy was the business behind you.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a comedian that talks about if you haven't worn it in 2 years, toss it. You know, have it down something. Yeah. I haven't worn this in 10 years.
Well, now the clock starts over for you.
So it still fits.
Yeah, we'll have to talk. There's quite a line here that you want to say good morning to.
Yeah.
I didn't know a motorboat was legal. I thought it had to be a canoe. None of this motorboat for you.
We did.
Okay.
We did.
I was gonna sit
Annelle and I are here, and I think Kathleen's coming over too. There she is.
Okay.
You know that I was
Okay. I'm not sure. Okay. Right.
Yep, there he is.
Okay.
Yeah, she's very good. She's only college, so.
I think I'm almost there.
Good morning. At this time, we're going to begin the services for Nancy. If you have your cell phone with you, I'm going to ask that you please silence it at this time. And I'm going to invite Pastor Connie Seifert forward to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
I need to be taller. Well, I begin with some words of love from 1 John chapter 4. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. So Nancy is no longer physically with us, but she is free. I watched those slides and free to do all the things she used to do. And Nancy will never leave you spiritually because your souls are connected by that power of love. So we are gathered here to help you begin to adjust to living without her physical presence. And you may already have noticed that she's spiritually present with you. Don't be surprised if you hear her voice in your head or you think you spot her in a crowd somewhere. Some days it's going to feel like she is just walking right beside you. And other days your heart will ache for just one more moment together. Grieving is a long process, and it's already begun. So now we will take time to celebrate Nancy's life, share precious memories, laugh, cry, and remember. Let us pray. God of love, touch each hurting heart with your healing grace. Give each person strength to remember even when it is hard, and grant them wisdom to share their feelings and their fears as they let you and Nancy know how much love is here in this room today. Amen. And now I believe Peter is going to speak first, correct? Is that right? Okay. I'm going to bring the microphone over, Peter. Give me a minute.
We'll see how that works. Hopefully it'll work.
The floor is yours.
Okay. I hope everybody can hear me okay. It's hard to put together or summarize someone's life in just a short time. Nancy and I were together for 45 years. She was my girlfriend, my spouse, the mother of my children, and she was my accountant and the organizer of my home. And she was my lover. And it's hard to summarize all that, but I first met Nancy at Church and Dwight. She was a lab technician, and I was a consultant working in an engineering department. And I just remembered her walking around. She was a beautiful young thing, and and I always thought that she always kind of gave me a special smile at the time. At the time, she lived in Plainfield with a dog named Greg. And Greg and Nancy did not get along. Greg was constantly giving Nancy trouble. She took him to obedience school. That didn't help at all. Greg would run away, and she would call the ASPCA, and they'd have the dog, and she'd pick him up. One day, the dog disappeared, and she couldn't find the dog for 2 weeks, and she was saying, "Thank goodness, maybe he's gone for good." But they called and said that they had the dog, so she had to go pick him up. Eventually, she did find a home for Greg, and Greg was happy to leave her, and she was happy to leave Greg. As I'll go on, I was the replacement for Greg. She moved to East Brunswick, and we started dating. And I remember the one time that I asked Nancy what she was doing for the weekend. She said, "Well, I'm going cross-country skiing up in Lake Placid. I'm going to Placid." And I said, "Oh, geez, that'd be great. Can I come too?" And I saw her kind of say, "Oops." She kind of had this funny look on her face. Well, so she said, "Well, I'll let you know later." So I was very naive. I didn't know what was going on. What was going on, of course, is that she was planning on going to Lake Placid with another boyfriend, to go cross-country skiing. So she apparently canceled with him, and we went up. That was kind of a magical trip. That's where we really kind of hit off, and it was the first one time I went out, I broke my ski. We had to go find another ski for it, replacement. I didn't have any money at the time. They were wood skis, so we had to prep them before we went. We wound up staying at the Adirondack Lodge, which was run by the Adirondack Mountain Club, and we skied around in that area. She was a great cross-country skier, and I was very clumsy. I was falling all over the place, and I remember going up to Marcy Dams, and she was skiing down the hills just like an expert, and I did a face plant at the bottom, and I just remember this guy with a great big backpack coming up. Of course, I was trying to impress Nancy, but I was not doing a very good job of it. And here's this big guy with a big beard and coming down for the backpack. And he looks down at me. I did my fast plan as he goes by me, and he says, "Good job, Jack." And I wondered why he called me Jack, and then I realized I took my hat off, and the hat that Nancy had given me said Cracker Jack on it, on the front. So, anyway, it was that. Following that, she invited me, or I got accepted into medical school, and then I was planning on originally trying to find a place up in Newark, and she invited me to stay with her in New Brunswick, in her apartment. So, as I said, I was the replacement for Greg, so I got to live with her, and we lived together for 2 years, and when I went to medical school, and then I proposed to her, and we were married. I continued to work for Church and Dwight for some time in medical school until I had to quit, and she went on to get a chemistry degree at Rutgers. Following my graduation, I remember that we went to Florida to see my parents and kind of go on a vacation together. It was kind of like our honeymoon, and I did surfing, and she stayed at the beach, and then we traveled up the coast. And I remembered that down in Florida, when I took her sailboating, I always thought I was a good sailor, and I remember that we were sailing near Cocoa Beach, and the sailboat went over, as it oftentimes did when I was sailing. And she managed to climb up without getting wet. She managed to climb, as the sailboat went over, she managed to climb up and stay dry. I could see this look, and I wound up going in to drink. Anyway, we rewrited it, but she always kidded me on that she managed to stay dry and I got wet. We went up the coast, and I remember we were camping out on the beach, and she brought a lot of stuff, a lot of suitcases and things, and we put those in the tent. And I remember all the tents were blowing down the beach except ours because of her suitcase. Her suitcase stuff kept the tents from blowing down. So our tent was the only one that stayed up. After a couple of days there camping out at Cape Hatteras, I thought she was having a good time, and it was I was surfing, and she was doing her thing on the beach. But one morning she said to me, "Here's some money. I'm going home. Here's some money. You can catch a bus back." I said, "Okay." It took me by surprise, and I said, "No, that's okay. I've had enough. Well, sure, we can go." But I just remember that very vividly. She just out of nowhere, she just gave me some money and said that, as I said, "Here's a bus. Here's some money for the bus back. I'm going home." It was her car, of course. I didn't own a car at that time. From there, we went to Syracuse, and she worked for a chemistry department at Syracuse in the Syracuse University, and actually got some work. Some of her research was actually published. So that's another thing, that she has some published papers, and I was never published at the time. So we had Bill the following year. Following that, I had to serve in the Navy, pay them back time for paying some of my way through medical school. So we went to while in Kings Bay, she was a Navy wife there, and we had some good memories staying in an apartment. We bought a house there. I remember that I remember that one time with my youngest son Bill, that he was about 3 years old, and he was crossing the road, and I told him not to do it or I'd have to punish him. And he did cross the road, so I took him and I gave him some spanking. That's how my parents had brought me up, to if I did something wrong. And I remember that she came out and she scolded me. I'll never forget that. She looked at me and she said, "Never touch my child like that again. Don't you ever touch him like that. Don't you ever spank him." And I realized at that time that, and I never spanked or did anything like that to any of my children since, and I realized that maybe the way my parents had brought me up and the way I thought that it was the right way was not the right way at all. That maybe that was, anyway, it was a learning experience for me. Annie was born in 85, and I remember the trip to the hospital. I remember the day before the hospital, we were staying with Dee Dee and Papa, and Nancy pointed out the window and saw something jumping out there, and there were right whales jumping just off the beach where we were, which was a rare occurrence at the time. And so we knew that there was an omen, that there was something good going to happen. And the next day, Annie was born. But I remember the trip to the beach. I remember the trip to the hospital I was driving, and Annie was, Nancy was in with me, and then Bill was there. We were all kind of together in the front seat, I believe. And I remember looking at Bill, and Nancy was in labor, and I remember looking at Bill, and I said, "You know what's going on?" And Bill was shaking his head, "Yep." You know, we knew that we were on our way to that he was going to have a young sister or brother. We weren't sure at the time. We didn't know. In 85, we went back for my residency, and we moved to Big Flats. And I still remember on the first day of July 4th, on the weekend when I came up, we rented a house. We had a house rental, and everything was on the front lawn. And I had to go into I had to go into the clinic. I was due to work on that day. And Dr. Templer had me scheduled for 16 patients, so I had to see 16 patients. And it was the July 4th weekend. I remember that Blaine Cobb came. He was kind of our director at the time. And he gave me a beeper and said that, how was work today? And I said, well, did you see the hospital? I said, yeah, I saw the hospital. He said, well, here's the beeper, and you're on call this weekend. And then so that's how Nancy and I first got introduced into Big Flats and Corning Hospital. And I've been busy ever since, and she put up with it ever since. She never complained. I got called at night many times, and she never complained about it. She always supported me. I couldn't have done everything that I did at Corning at Corning Hospital without her support. I could never be the person I am or the physician I am. Katie was born in 89, and then Mikey was born in 93. During this period of time, Nancy got involved with the school system and was with learning disability programs, and she became a parent advocate and was very involved with the school system as a parent advocate for meetings dealing with children who had learning disabilities and needed extra help. She also became very involved with the PTA and was in some of the, I forget which position, but she held a couple of different positions within the PTA. She ran for the board and didn't get elected. It was at the time there were 3 or 4 people running for the board for the same position. I encouraged her to run at another time when there weren't so many people running, but she never ran again for it. But that was, we worked together. She would have been good on the board. It was a shame that she wasn't, but I remember that she was, during this period of time, we were involved with the Cub Scouts later in the 90s, and she was the chairwoman of the Cub Scout troop, and I was the Cub master. She had, we remember that we put together one meeting with a bunch of, where the kids would tie balloons around their, we had one game where the kids would tie balloons around their ankles, and this was a game that she invented. And then they would go around trying to pop each other's balloons. Of course, it made a lot of noise. A lot of the parents complained it was too noisy, but the kids had fun. She became, when the kids got older, she became treasurer for Troop 29, and I was the chairperson and later became the scout master for a time. During this period of time, we also had vacations to Keuka Lake that I remember that we had good times with Annie and her cousins, and we got to visit, and those were good times. Around 2009, she was diagnosed with inclusion body myositis, which is a slowly progressive disease that causes progressive weakness of muscles. We went to Johns Hopkins and had the diagnosis verified there. We made plans from there on how to design the house to accommodate her disabilities as things would progress. She never gave up. She was always thinking on how she could progress with her illness. And she continued to help Mikey, Bill, Annie, and me, and continued to support us all during that period of time. We went to various different, I was worried that she wouldn't be able to travel later and that we wouldn't have a retirement. So I set up some trips for her to go to Hawaii, San Diego, Orlando, Orleans, Nashville. We had good times during those trips. And the Nashville trip was funny. We went there, and then on the way back, we stopped at Detroit, and the weather was too cold, and we had to stay in a hotel. We didn't have our luggage. Our luggage was in the plane, and the trips out from Detroit were all canceled, so we had to stay in a hotel without any of our luggage or anything, and she loved it. We had a great time. We had to stay there 2 days until the weather cleared up enough until we could get a plane flight out. But we were locked up together in a room, and the weather was too cold outside. We didn't have any coats or anything, and she loved it. She had a great time. It was she noticed, as I mentioned, fatigue and weakness in 2008, 2009. After extensive medical workup, she was diagnosed with inclusion body myositis, a slowly progressive muscle disease. Despite the diagnosis, we planned how to compensate for it. And with the help of Clint Snyder, who was kind of our handyman, and my son Bill, we put in stair escalators, bathrooms, set up bathrooms, tried to set the house up so that she could function, made so the lights and the television would work by voice control. Eventually, she was unable to work, but she still managed to tell people how to cook. She loved cooking. And so I learned how to cook pies, and Bill and Mike learned how to cook, thanks to her directions to us. She took her mother, Lillian, who needed extra help, to her house and continued to supply and arrange for extra assistance and help. And all these things she did as she was deteriorating and her muscles were getting weaker and her voice was getting weaker. She continued to help with Mike and Katie with finances and help continue to do the finances and arrange for care. Her muscle weakness eventually progressed to the point that she had respiratory failure, leading to her death. And Nancy and I spent 45 years together. It's that we had good times and bad times. Most of them were good. And with that, we'll just share one poem that kind of summarizes how I feel, I guess, by Robert Frost. And I just feel that someday I'll join her again when we'll be out cross-country skiing in the woods, in the lovely, dark, and deep woods. And I'll join her, but I promise us to keep still. And miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. But I'll be there with her again. And it's all.
Thank you, Peter. Who wanted to go next?
Thank you. Take off my mask. Okay. To me, my mother was an amazing person that I looked to for support whenever I was in trouble. She was compassionate, never backed down from a fight, and was a terrific cook. As I was preparing for this eulogy, I tried to dig up any fond memories that I had of my mother. I started to realize that the small memories I had of my mother were the most important, for they would be the ones that I would keep in my heart and soul forever. In my early years of childhood, I was an energetic and chaotic child that tried to gain the attentions of others and see their reactions. For instance, my older sister Katie, for who I would torment with my hypergenic behavior. I'm not entirely sure how Mom never lost her mind at trying to raise us, including me. But I like to think she did right as I look from where I stand. She was an amazing mother in how she raised 4 children. She would wake up at the crack of dawn and make us lunches. For me, it was always a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a fruit and yogurt or pudding. And she would make 3 other lunches for my siblings. She got us out of bed and would prepare our breakfast and see us off to school by having the bus pick us up. While we were away at school, she would either clean the house or go to PTA meetings. Afterwards, she would welcome us home from school, where she would prepare a big dinner for all of us to enjoy. Then she would instruct us to do our homework until it hit 8 o'clock, where during that time, it was a time of rest. Then at 9 o'clock, we younger kids were escorted to bed to wake up the next morning to do it all over again. Now that I think back to it, she was an amazing mother that could do anything for her children, and there was nothing she couldn't do. That is, and still now, how I see her even now. Although Mom did have her bad girl vibes every once in a while. I remember back when she took me and Kay to the food market Wegmans, we would be so excited. You might be asking, why would we be so excited to go to Wegmans with her at our age? Well, every time we went to Wegmans with her, she would let us have fresh donuts from the bakery department. And we would eat them then and there. She would go up to the register and tell the cashier we just had donuts. However, Mom was very forgetful, and so were we. And we would walk out of the store without paying them. By the time we remembered, we would tell Mom that we forgot to pay, and she would have this shocked expression for a second. That would then turn to, "Oh well, too late now." And she would continue her day without a care in the world. There was also this other time where she would tell this story frequently to us, where she used to serve as a waitress at a restaurant that she worked in. She was out there serving patrons foods and drinks until the restaurant had begun to run low on ice. Of course, the restaurant tried to conserve the amount of ice that was available to them by spreading as little as possible until they had officially run out of ice. It was then that one woman received a drink that didn't contain any ice, and she let everyone know it, that she didn't have any ice in her drink. The waitresses in the restaurant told her that they were out of ice, but the woman didn't care and wanted her ice in her drink pronto. My mother, who was getting increasingly annoyed by this woman, took a spoon and dished out some ice with it and put the ice in her drink and said, "There, you got ice." And she walked away. Needless to say, this didn't go over too well with her boss. I was asked in an interview with Wegmans at one point about what was my favorite restaurant in town. And I said, I don't really have a favorite. If I had to choose, it would be my mother's cooking. Although, back then, even before then, I never really appreciated her cooking until I entered college. Food at the schools were sometimes a hit or miss, where they would serve some sort of crab cake dish and not so cooked sausage patties, which I got food poisoning from. However, whenever I had a chance to go back home, I was always looking forward to my mother's cooking. She could make a large list of dishes that she had learned from either our grandmother, who was also a fantastic cook in her own right, or a recipe that she had found online or in a cookbook. An example of dishes that she could make included chicken chow mein, tacos, fennel and sausage stew, shrimp curry, broccoli cheddar soup, chicken cacciatore, spaghetti, and meatballs, and so many more. I remember that I would rush home to eat one of these dishes that she made right after classes. As I was eating, I would take a deep breath while my cheeks were full of food and breathe out to acquire the full taste of what I had just eaten, and I would let out a relaxed sigh. Mom always did enjoy me eating her food and always got a kick about how good I thought it was, and she would joke about how I should have been a chef or a critic. However, over the years, she got weaker and couldn't manage to hold even a fork anymore and had to hang up her apron. But her teachings were passed on to us on how to make the perfect dinner for others to come. I will always be grateful to her for providing me when I needed her most in my time of need, such as having emotional breakdowns, getting into an accident, or maybe I was just having a really bad day. She was always there to console me, even in her sickened state. She never complained about being sick, and she always put her kids before her own sake. I always enjoyed the small times we had together in these last few years, such as eating dinner together and watching shows such as Star Trek and MASH, which always put a smile on her face. And seeing that brought comfort to me. Again, I loved her oh so much with all my heart and soul that I will forever miss her. And I hope someday I can see her again. So I just want to say thank you, Mom, for being there for me. I know I will always be there for you. Loving you always and forever, no matter where you are. Farewell for now, Mother. I love you.
I'm going to keep this short so I don't end up rambling. Let's see. So, my mother dedicated her life to taking care of her family. It's something that I don't think most people could do, but I believe she did it without any regrets at all. A memory that sticks out in my mind was how we would clamber into her bed at night for story time, and she would let us pick out the story that she would read. Now, when I was in elementary school, we were allowed to check out books from the library, and I would bring home some books for her to read. One book in particular was a tale of the original Grimm's fairy tales. And if anyone knows anything about the Brothers Grimm stories, then you know it's not very child-friendly by today's standards. I remember my mother reading one of the stories, and this one in particular had a scene where I believe the evil stepmother in the story goes to behead the protagonist and in the night, but instead beheads her own daughter. I don't remember which story this is, don't ask me. And I remember my mother reading this story, and right when she reached the sentence where this happened, she paused for a few seconds, then turned to me and said, "Let's read something else." And it was after we finished story time that she would ask me, "Katie, don't ask me to read these stories again." And now that I'm saying this, I think I remember similar moments like this from the same book, actually. But that scene was the last straw, I think, where she finally told me not to do that again. I know I was not the easiest child to raise, but I know that she tried her best. Even though she didn't always understand me, I know she loved me. Even though we didn't always agree on matters, I know she was thinking of me and worrying about me. In the past few years, I would still make time to call her every other week to tell her about my day, my hopes and plans. She sounded happy just to hear me talk. And I know it made her happy, so I always made sure to call even if I didn't have much to say. I would have liked for her to remain with us just a little bit longer. I was not ready to say goodbye. I love you, Mom, and I'm grateful for all that you've done for me and all the time we spent together.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Closer? Can you hear me better now? Okay, good. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here. Everyone's support means so much, and all of you, had a special place in my mom's heart. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I was told I actually have too much to say, so I'll see what I can do to make it a little bit shorter. But just so many things, come flooding back to you. So I just want to start by saying, I was asked once if I was a daddy's girl or a mommy's girl. That is an easy answer. I was totally a mommy's girl. We had such amazing memories together from the day I was born until the day that she died. And she was always so supportive of us growing up, and she was happy and nurturing and just so loving. And I just have so many memories of, she just let us tear apart the house, right? We would build these massive cushion forts, right? And we'd have these crazy jumping contests, and we'd be running around screaming, chasing each other with Nerf guns. And she never stopped us. She just kind of let us do this. She let us be wild and crazy and unconventional. And she even let us, my brother and I, used to chase my sister around with a plastic spider when she annoyed us. And she was petrified of it, like legitimately petrified. And my mom let us do this, for reasons that, I later on might become, a little bit more apparent, and she would kick us outside too, and make us have our own fun. And if we were bored, she would set us to cleaning. So we would never say we were bored. That was always not a good thing. And although she never really participated that much in our antics, she was there, she was present. She was always in the kitchen. She was constantly cooking. She was constantly making good food for us, good dinners. I complained to my friend once, I'm like, we're having mashed potatoes again for dinner. Ugh. And my friend was like, and I was like, we have those every night. And my friend was like, you have mashed potatoes every night? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'd never really thought about how lucky we were, in our family to have a mom like her. And she prided herself on her pies. I think you've all probably had, one of her pies. She was definitely the best pie maker in the family. Unlike maybe some other families, we would have our pie immediately following dinner. So if you were done with dinner, the pie was on the table, you were digging in right away. And then if there was any leftovers, we would have that for dessert. And I remember explaining this to my husband, Scott, and he's like, that's crazy. But we loved it. And that's how we grew up. And I just want to talk a little bit. My mom had a really wicked sense of humor. She just loved to make jokes and, just funny comments all the time. I always felt like she was just trying to make these jokes all the time about just about any situation. She loved Laurel and Hardy, Pink Panther, The Three Stooges, John Candy. But one of her favorite comedies was Dumb and Dumber. Okay, so when we first watched this movie, there's this part in the movie where they give a blind boy a dead parrot with his head duct taped on. It's very morbid, and the blind boy was going, pretty bird, and I think we're all horrified, right? And my dad probably included. My mom is roaring with laughter. I has never heard her laugh so hard. She just thought that was hilarious. She was almost on the floor laughing. She loved to laugh. I mean, she loved to laugh at our stories too. We have so many family stories that we would just recount, every day, every week or something, right? We would just recall all those funny stories that we share as a family, including that story about the plastic spider and chasing my sister around. And I think that's probably why she never stopped us. She probably thought it was hilarious. But my mom was such a fighter too. She probably took after my papa. She always stood up for what she believed in, and she always wanted us to stand up for ourselves. She was so opinionated about, whatever it was, whatever topic it was, whether it be block scheduling or something political. She would be writing red letters to the editor all the time, right, and getting those published. And she just prided herself on doing those things and trying to persuade people and make a difference. One thing I remember, she would always fight for us children, even when we didn't want her to. She would intervene in the school and whatever it is going into our lives. But it was always for the best. I remember one year I had a C+ in math, and I wasn't going to make it to honors math. And somehow I ended up in honors math, and I know it was my mom, hands down, that convinced them to put me in there. And thank goodness she did. She always knew what was best for us. She thought I would be an actuary, and today I'm a data scientist. So good job, Mom. So when I did set out to college, in my own work, we would have such long conversations. I wasn't always present, right? But we would talk on the phone for an hour or 2 hours at a time, and it didn't matter what we were talking about. Anything was on the table, and she always was there for me. She never had anything more important to do than to talk to me. She was incredibly supportive and encouraging in my career path, not only because I was her daughter, but in many ways it was similar to her own. She'd always recount the days she was working at Church and Dwight. And in those days, it was definitely like a man's world, right? So she always kind of prided herself on an accomplishment that she had, I'll share with you. So they were having an issue on the conveyor belts, and things were coming off and they were sticking. Things weren't coming off right. And my mom worked in a totally different department, so she had been hearing about this for a while. And they were just these engineers, they were dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on. And my mom overheard them, and she just says, "It's static electricity." And they were like, wow. And that was it. It was static electricity. And my mom always ended this story where she got a good bonus that year, So she was so incredibly smart, so talented as a chemist and in her career. But my mom's pride and joy was definitely her children. Like so many moms, she would do anything for us. Even when her disease was impacting her ability to do normal things. She heard that Trevor was born, and she had to drive down immediately to take care of me. And I'll never forget when Trevor was crying inconsolably. My mom would march him around the dining room table to soothe him, because that's what she did with us. She was so strong. She handled her illness with a grace that not many would have. And on the last day I spent with her, I was just recounting stories, and we were laughing at just all the small little things that happened in life, and because she loved to laugh, and she loved life. And she always said that she was lucky and things could be worse. You know, she really did say that. She said it could be worse. But I just want to, and my mom taught me how to be a mom to my kids, how to let them to be wild, unconventional, and free. She made them, make them feel loved and listen and soak up life and laughing, you know, and also make good food, right? So important. You know, she'll always be in my heart and in my thoughts when I swish my kids through the water singing "Go Little Motorboat Go." When I tuck them in every night, or just dancing in the kitchen to some oldies. My mom is a never-ending song in my heart of comfort, happiness, and being. I may sometimes forget the words, but I always remember the tune. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my mom, Nancy Parken, from the perspective of her oldest son. Being the oldest, I was the one who got all the great pictures. You know, in a house, when we were going over all the pictures, I was in so many of them. So I'm sorry, you guys. So, and while there's a great deal I have forgotten over the years, there are still some things I still remember. I remember our little white house when we rented in Syracuse, how me and Mom would pretend the small foyer, was our private elevator into our house, how we would stand there waiting several seconds, leaning against the walls, waiting for the elevator to drop down to the street level so we could walk outside. I remember our old yellow house in Big Flats, where we would go over to Arts and Dots swimming pool in the summer, and all the fun we had there, how lucky I felt to have a pool we could use whenever we wanted, you would be there to watch, us play, or you'd be there to play with us and watch us so we could have a good time. It was very well could have been the first spot where the phrase "Go Little Motorboat Go" was first uttered, or was first coined. I remember when we moved to Painted Post, in the first home my parents would own. Well, I guess Dad said earlier, I guess we actually owned a house in Georgia, so I guess second home. That home that we came to in Painted Post was 122 West Hill Terrace, where we still are today. It was here when we first moved in that we had a section of the yard that had all these like rocks and stones, and we wanted to actually make it like a real yard and everything like that. And I just remember my mom told both me and Annie that she would pay us 1 cent for every stone we would pick up out of the yard and move out into the woods. And what wound up happening was I understood the assignment. I knew that there was all these big rocks out there, so I started hauling all the biggest rocks I could find and putting them to the cart to get them to haul them away. And then I remember watching Annie, and Annie was always going after the smallest stones in the yard. And pretty soon I found out that it was she was going to get paid a lot more than I was. So eventually Annie came. But I kept on going after the big rocks anyways, because I understood the assignment. I knew what she really wanted. But then eventually Mom kind of came to me and said, "Just go get the big rocks, Bill," or small rocks. I'm sorry. So So she would later admit to me that she goofed and she didn't want one child making out like a bandit while the other made a lot less doing the same work. I still remember the story every night before bed. Mom would read to us in her bed, just story time. Among the memories, ones were some of the stories she read were stories like Billy Goat's Gruff, and my personal favorite, Scuffy the Tugboat, a story she would later remind me she had to read almost every single night, or I asked her to read almost every single night. She had basically memorized the entire story and could read it, half asleep, if not, fully asleep. So, and then when we were older, these novels became, these stories became light novels, and she would read a chapter a night. Some of these were things like The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. It was one of these nights while reading, I remember Annie, without my knowledge, got up to wash her hands. But I was so focused on the story, I hadn't realized she wasn't in bed, or she wasn't, there anymore. And all I could remember was, focusing on the story. And my mom then quoted one of the Hardy Boys saying, "Gosh, Grandma, this is great soup. Did you use soap?" What I didn't realize at the time was that she stopped mid-sentence to ask Annie if she had used soap when she washed her hands. And I was just thinking to myself, it's like, gosh, is Mom teasing me? Is this for real? Like, is the grandma trying to poison her sons or something? So I eventually figured it out, and I told everybody what I had heard her say. So, but when it was time for bed, when it was time for bed, and she did this for everybody, by the way, she would always sing, "Bedtime for Bill in painted post." Ba-doop, 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 ba-doop. In the mornings when it was time to get up, I had no need for an alarm. My alarm was always my mom, and she would always say in the calmest, gentlest voice, before school often, it was, "Bill, it's time to get up," while, ever so gently, rubbing my back, or sometimes on rare occasions, she would sing to us, get up, the sun is up in the sky, get up, time is starting to fly, get up, you must be on your way, you never can borrow time from tomorrow, that's a waste today, that time's a waste today. At the time, I probably didn't think much of these things, but I probably responded to her with a grunt, when these things happened. But I was always thankful, as I am now, that she was always there to help rouse us in the morning. She was always there helping me. However, in later life, I would be spending more time helping her. I minded. I love sharing stories with her, and I just having long conversations in the car with her was something I always deeply enjoyed. On one car ride, I remember taking her down to Baltimore. I was actually to Johns Hopkins on one trip where it was just me and her. Originally, it was going to be my dad who was going on that trip, but I told her I wanted to take her down. You see, because I had heard on a previous trip that she had went down that she had the most marvelous, fish that she had ever had at any restaurant, and she was always very critical of restaurants. No food was ever as good as what she could make. So I was a little taken back by this. I wanted to see what restaurant it was that could impress her. So I went with her, and we had a great time. We went to the aquarium and we went to the restaurant, and I did have some of the fish. And while I have to say that it was a very good meal, I'm pleased to announce that I still prefer my mom's cooking. So, for a short period of time, I would take her over to HealthWorks, and where I would help her get into the wading pool, and she would walk around, just basically I would drop her off in there, and she would, do some, just walking around in the pool, and I would actually just kind of go over and just swim some laps. And I guess I never really, thought too much about it. But Annie had always heard it. Her mom had always told Annie all these stories about how she had so much fun doing that. And I just, that means a lot. I just feel that, she really enjoyed that. I would always make time for Mom, all the way up into just a few weeks ago. I would come over almost every Saturday or Sunday and spend a few hours with her, talking with her about how my week was, what I did, and, any fun stories. And she enjoyed telling me her stories about, I enjoyed, telling her how my stories were. We would sometimes watch shows like Narcos, House of Cards, Star Trek, or movies like Sherlock Holmes and Robert Downey, or Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. on her, personal favorite Master and Commander. We would also watch random YouTube clips and things I thought she would think were funny, ranging from clips about animals to people doing weird and funny things. I always wanted to try to get her to laugh, and I always liked seeing her having a good time. These visits were often, brief and ended with a brief kiss and I love you, and that I would be back the next week. I always made time for Mom. I always loved doing everything I could to make her happy and to see her smile, because when she was happy, I was happy. Mom, from the earliest memories of you until today, I think you were perfect. I always did in my youth, and always will consider myself to be the luckiest boy alive, because I had you as my mother.
My name is Peggy, and I'm going to read something that my sister Bonnie wrote. We were Nancy's sister-in-laws, had a lot of history together. My thoughts and feelings about Nancy. This is from Bonnie. I am deeply sorry and sad for not being with you to celebrate Nancy's life. However, my sister has offered to read what I have written. Nancy and I had a loving and caring friendship. When I went up to Painted Post to visit my parents, I always called her and looked forward to a visit filled with delicious coffee, laughter, and a lot of love. She would greet me at the door with a friendly, "Hi, Bonnie," and I'd hurry to the kitchen where she would pour me a mug of coffee, and off we'd go into the family room where we would talk and laugh. At some point in our conversation, she'd fill up my mug again, and off we would go to talk and laugh some more. Nancy's laughter was spontaneous. It would burst forth with strength, vitality, and absolute delight. She would break out in peals of laughter at something funny that one of her children had said or done, or when Daisy or Muffin would vie for her attention, or something funny I would say. She would lean in, listen closely, and then laugh with sheer enjoyment and abandon. I looked forward to her visits every time I flew up to Painted Post, knowing that at Nancy's I could let my hair down, so to speak, with fun, laughter, and love. Holidays were an important part of her life. When I flew up for Thanksgiving or Christmas, she would invite my parents, my brother Jack, and me to share a marvelous dinner and scrumptious pumpkin. Sorry. Yeah. Delicious dinner and sumptuous pumpkin and apple pies. She was always solicitous towards my parents, Jack and me, making sure that we were comfortable and had what we needed. Of course, we all know that the best pies in all of Painted Post, Corning, and beyond came from Nancy's kitchen. I just want to say something. That talent still exists. It's been passed down. I love Nancy very, very much, and I will miss her. Towards the end of her life, she was so brave as this unrelenting, merciless disease took her away from her children and the rest of her family. She will live long in my heart, and when I need a little more love and laughter in my life, I will close my eyes and relive all the memories I have that will put a smile on my face and love in my heart. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak?
Hi, I'm Tim Jackson. I'm a friend of the family. I've known the Parkens for many, many years. One of the things that I will always remember about Mrs. Parken is actually her smile and just how she just always seemed to be smiling. No matter what was going on, you know, all the chaos, like how Mikey was saying, he was a very energetic child, and I remember getting ready for camping trips to the Boy Scouts, and Mikey would often be running around with what we'd call a Goku stick, which is a little plastic stick from a cartoon show that you would have. He'd be whacking us with it, and so we'd have to chase him, and the whole time Mrs. Parken's just smiling about it, and just thought it was the funniest thing. So that's one thing I will always kind of remember, and that's something I feel like I've learned from her, is just to kind of smile through the chaos, and kind of no matter what's going on, just always have a smile on your face. So thank you very much, guys.
I just wanted to quickly say that Nancy shared that patience, not just with her own kids, but with the whole Troop 29. She multiple times had the whole troop to her house, and I would wonder at her patience, and she taught me a lot, honestly, and all that my son learned from the Parkens, from Mrs. Parken, and from Doc as well, standing in parking lots waiting to go, and Pete would call Nancy and say, I forgot this and I forgot that, and in the meantime, Mikey and the kids are chasing everybody around in the parking lot while we stood there another half hour waiting for Nancy to come down and deliver the items that we needed, and incredible patience. And I tried to take over for her as committee chairperson at one time when she decided to take a little break, and it was a challenge for me because she was so efficient. We all knew Nancy was the business end of Scouts. She was getting everything together for us. And the troop meetings, the committee meetings were intimidating because at a certain point, I put the Scoutmaster's report at the end of the meeting so that the rest of us had a chance to chat about the other things before the parents started showing up to pick everybody up. So great memories, and Nancy was just patient, kind, and learning to cross-country ski up at their house, sharing their skills with everyone, parenting skills, honestly, from Nancy too, because I was a lot more tight kind of parent, and so the meetings were a lot of fun, and my son always enjoyed it. So thanks, Parkens, for sharing your mother.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So I've also known the Parkens for a long time. One of the first memories I have was the same thing. It was a camping trip. We were all getting around. Of course, this comes back to you, Mike. Mrs. Parken's free spirit really shone through that day because we're getting around, just hanging around out front. Mikey, who was probably 5 or 6, was running around with no clothes outside. And Mrs. Parken just said, Mikey, get in here and put on some shoes. Said, okay, so those are the rules here. And I did recently get to work with Mike for a little bit, and we got to spend some extended time together. After the first couple days, I thought, we've talked a lot about pies. Now I know why, because apparently the pies at your house was the place to go to. So I was lucky enough where I got to see her a couple times a month for the last few years. And she always had such great things to say about you guys, so thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I say something? This is
Yes.
Hillary.
Hold on, wait, let me get the mic. Can you all hear her?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Hillary. Diane Nancy was my aunt. I'm the cousin of Bill and Annie and Katie and Mike. Sorry, I'm a little emotional. But Aunt Nancy was so dearly loved by us cousins. I got to spend a few weeks during the summer up staying with the Parkens. And I just remember how much fun her house was and how she always welcomed people into her house. And that was even up to recently. My whole life, I always knew that if I wanted to come see her or, she just always welcomed people into her home. And it was so always comfortable. She made sure that everybody had everything they needed when I stayed up there. And, at the time I didn't think about it, but now that I'm a parent, I realized how much work it was to make sure she was always thinking about her kids and her guests and just so thoughtful. And, I think of her, at odd times. I think of her when I'm putting sunscreen on my kids. She was so protective of her children. She always ensured they had sunscreen, white all over them during the summers. But it's just kind of emblematic of how much she really cared and how much effort and work she put in to ensure, she was protecting them and an advocate for her kids. She was, very laissez-faire, as they say, as when we were up there. We got to do a lot, whatever we wanted, but the only time I ever remember being scolded is if I was ever unkind. She did not tolerate unkindness. She was a very kind person. And she taught me a lot also about being a parent and I think of her. I think of her when I'm having these moments with my kids too. And I'm just so thankful that she was my aunt and that I got to spend time with her. I feel that she was taken too soon and that's very difficult. But I am very thankful for the time that we got to spend and wish I could be up there with everybody and just loved her very much. So thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the Zoom room? Anyone else here? I forget I have it on sometimes. and it doesn't do well with earrings and hearing aids. It's a challenge. I'm just going to share with you just a little bit it's from John 14, and Jesus is trying to prepare the disciples for his leaving this world, his physical presence being gone. And he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and I will take you there myself, so that where I am, there you may be also." Jesus loved his followers, the men he called his disciples, and the women who had faithfully followed him and taken care of him. Jesus' followers loved him. They did not want to hear what Jesus was saying, and they did not want to think of what their world would be like without him. Loving someone means that when they die, our hearts hurt like hell. Loving someone means that even when we have moments when we get angry, frustrated, or annoyed, somehow we get past it and we just keep on loving. Loving someone means sharing an intense soul-to-soul bond for eternity. And that's what you shared with Nancy. And that's what Nancy shared with you. Every tear that falls is that love making itself felt in your heart and soul. So don't hold back the tears, let them out. Crying lets the hurt out and lets healing in. And this grief will bring up all the other griefs you've ever faced in your life, so don't be surprised and just let it happen and let the tears fall and move through it. The bad news is that the hurt in your heart, it's there from here on out. It is never going to go away. The good news is it means that you loved Nancy and she loved you, and that love is with you forever. Nothing can take that love, that comforting truth away from you. Memories will make you laugh like you've seen today. They'll make you laugh as often as they make you cry. And leaning on each other will make your love stronger. Loving others is the only way to go. We all need to love and be loved, especially when we are grieving. Let love change you for the better, and then you change the world for the better because of that love. Now, each person is going to go through grief in their own way. There's no right or wrong way, so don't try and tell somebody how to grieve or when to get over it or anything. It all happens to everyone, and God's grace is this incredible gift that gets us through. It helps us to heal. So keep on remembering. Have a good cry when you need to. Bake a pie when you need to. Go off and be alone if you need to. But stay in touch with each other and keep on loving. Because God sent Jesus to tell us that love never ends and love cannot die. Love is good for our souls, and it keeps us spiritually strong. So thank God for Nancy, as you all have been doing, and thank God for that eternal bond of love. And in Nancy's memory and in her honor, keep on loving. Let us pray. Holy God, we thank you for all that has been shared here today. We pray for your comfort and care to be with each and every person who is grieving. and for your healing grace to just enter into all these souls, and may their healing just happen. Be with each one as they move through the grieving process, and give them your grace and peace. Amen. And now, for as much as the spirit of Nancy A. Parken has departed this earth and returned to God who gave her to us, we now commit her body to a final rest. Her spirit we entrust to God's eternal care. She is free. We share the sadness of today, but we also share the hope of that grand reunion one day in heaven. May Nancy rest in peace and rise in glory. Amen. And now, pre-COVID, I would speak to each family member individually, and I would shake your hand, and I would give you this blessing. God grant us strength for life's journey, joy and faithful living, the blessings of loving and being loved. The peace of God is with us always. May God be with you and give you strength. Amen.
I want to start by thanking you, Pastor, for your words and for all the beautiful words that were shared here today. This does conclude the services today. On behalf of Nancy's family, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here in support. And I ask and encourage all of you over the upcoming weeks and months to please continue to keep her family in your thoughts and prayers. This time and space is yours, so I invite anyone wishing to come forward to pay their last respects to please do so before you leave. And on behalf of myself and the funeral home, I just want to say thank you for allowing us the honor of caring for your mom.